What's up? I'm back. In this segment, I'm going to talk about the power of imagination, and I'm going to talk about it from a different angle. It's not going to be dreamy. I think sometimes the imagination takes a bad rap because when people talk about it, they get into dreamy stuff, they get into fantasy. They don't get into what the whole purpose of the imagination was really for. In tarot card traditions, imagination was usually associated with the empress. And it's very important because the empress herself was usually associated with imagination and Venus. But the empress herself was usually a more dense version of the high priestess. The high priestess being subconscious. Reason why imagination is so powerful is because in general, it's kind of like it's a lesser part of the subconscious, but the interesting thing is it's a part of the subconscious, or it's a version of subconscious that contains the conscious mind as well. So if you want to think about you driving a bus, you're gonna drive the bus straight up. If you want to think about yourself flying the plane, you're gonna fly the plane. So that's your conscious mind, but now directing a large part of your intuitive mind. So the imagination was powerful because it was kind of like a combination of both. This is why in the tarot traditions, the high priestess tends to be considered a virgin. She's a little skinnier. The imagination is more plump, fatter, because the empress is more plump, fatter, because the empress was symbolic of the high priestess impregnated by the magician, which the magician being your conscious mind. The reason why that's important is because when people are looking at it now, they don't really realize that the empress or the imagination is powerful because it's kind of like symbolic of both your minds being activated using it at the same time. Why that's important is because the biggest problem people have today is that they're too hemisphere heavy. They're either more right-sided or left-sided. They have to be able to use both hemispheres equally. And what happens is when you can use both hemispheres with equal strength, you then tap into the superconscious mind, which the superconscious mind is sort of the real you, if you want to call it that. And when it's the real you, what that means is the fact that that's the mind that's kind of the inner genius, higher self. When you achieve Buddhahood or Christhood or Horushood, depending on your lunar spiritual system. What that really means is that that's or the inner genie, when you bring down your true genius in you. All human beings are born geniuses, but we're born with the ability to not access that part of our minds, if that makes any sense to you. So when you fuse both of those hemispheres together in your mind, then you achieve that, or you can but it has to be over a prolonged period of time. Imagination sort of being symbolic of that element. It's very important to have the imagination to use that as a bridge or as a tool to get back to that state of being. The problem comes in now with imagination is people are very concerned, or they're too concerned with fantasy, daydreaming, things that in a sense doesn't have as much relevance to our physical world at this moment, which is the big problem. So when you go in the tarot card tradition, the emperor is right after the high priest. It's right after the empress, right? And the emperor is an interesting card because in his hand he holds an ankh-like figure, right, or scepter. What's that's important is because he, in a sense, the emperor is the one who controls the physical world. He does it through working and being able to filter out the empress. So what that means is the emperor, being more logic, comes in and kind of cleans out the subconscious and the imagination. And when it cleans it out, keeps it clean, it can focus on things that it has to focus on, things that are important for what it wants to do for that moment. It's very important. I could be into cartoons, and Smurfs, and Care Bears, or whatever, but that's not relevant to my spiritual work, my academic work, or my career. Just like some people, they want to have superpowers. They want to talk about, I turn into macabres, I do this, yada, yada, yada. But yet they can't connect to nature or even take control of their physical life. What does that really mean? Well, it means kind of what it means to be in a sense. And it means that you need a strong logical mind to be able to control the imagination. This is why science and mathematics are so important. And most people don't really realize science and mathematics and reason, being able to study things like politics, economics, deeply affect your spiritual path. As crazy as it may seem. And the only reason why it seems crazy is because people have unbalanced paths and they think that the two are different. It's kind of funny how some people say don't study politics, but then politicians at the highest levels are dealing with the occult. Don't you think that's a problem? Obviously, there's a mixture between the two. Don't deal with economics, don't care about money, but the highest bankers are dealing with serious occultism. That's how they create this fantasy that people buy into. So obviously, there's a link between the two. In a sense, the occult gave birth to everything, good or bad. So when you look at it like that, if you try to study spirituality, and then I know a lot of people sometimes the problem comes in too, is that you would have people who want to study spirituality, and then in their minds, spirituality and occult is two different things, and that's actually very popular. To be honest, I'm sure I will get a few of those comments in this video. Problem comes in is that the spirituality that you're referring to, where you don't know that part of the cult, is a lazy man spirituality. That's the difference, to be honest. There's no question about that. If Christ says everything I could do, or he could do, we could do too, and then people, instead of just ignore that part and say, let's just worship him, that's lazy man mentality. You could spin it. That's lazy man mentality. If I just say all you gotta do is meditate, you don't gotta know any alternative health, you don't gotta know no politics, no economics, no astrology, no astronomy, no alchemy, no nothing, no psychology, no magic, just meditate. And maybe get some crystals that you don't know anything about. You don't know anything about geology, you don't know anything about the mineral mind, but you expect the crystal to work for you. When in shamanism or animism or nature magic, bush magic, rocks, crystals were serious allies. But you got to know about the mind. You got to be able to get into their mind. In order to get into their mind, you got to be able to get into your own subconscious mind. It means you're going to need psychology. It means you're going to have to study bush medicine, animism, shamanism. There's no quick fixes to this stuff. But we get all this quick fix stuff because, again, people think spirituality and occult are different. And they are different. Spirituality that you're referring to is probably the lazy man. It's just like fast food. Same thing, to be honest. And that may seem harsh, but it's reality. And this is why the imagination has to be paired with some serious knowledge in science and mathematics, psychology, reason. Because if you don't, you will get into space cadet stuff very quickly, to be honest. And that is going to be counterproductive to everyone, yourself included. Because in the end of the day, human beings were blessed with gifts. Not gifts to be gods, the way people think. You could describe it as a gift to be God, but it's really a gift to be the ultimate servant. When you look at the animal mind, it's a process that we call modification, where your logical mind looks at something and modifies it. So, when everybody, talks about a ton of gold, you get gold, an alchemist modifies it, makes it into something else. Right? You see grapes, you modify it, and you make it into wine. That process is part of what spirituality really is, to be honest. True spirituality is creating modifications in your brain chemistry, modifications in your blood chemistry. Now, if you want to know what that is, let's say a drug. You take a drug, the drug changes your brain and blood chemistry. You experience visions, altered perception, all that type of stuff. Spirituality does the same thing, but it does it more subtle and it does it more healthy. Drugs obviously have their own effects. So the ability to create modifications in your blood and brain is what spirituality is all about. If you don't know that, that's not explained to you, you need to really read it and see it again. If what you're doing is not dealing with that, then you're not going to achieve what you want. To be honest, when somebody says reaching enlightenment, the reason why, or any, whatever, Horus hood, Christ hood, whatever hood or whatever name you want to say, you're not going to be able to do that in the present human brain, the way the brain is wired, the way the blood is, because even the blood, when they talk about water copying thoughts, blood copies thoughts. All liquid copies thoughts, not just water. Your blood being a version of liquid. So your thoughts directly affect your blood. Once it affects your blood, it directly eventually is going to affect your DNA and your cellular body. So, in a sense, when you look at it from that perspective, the imagination is a weapon. It's something that's very important in a sense because it links to your unique purpose, your unique, what you're here for uniquely. The reason why people don't know what they are or don't know what they're supposed to do is because everyone's been shut off. Our conscious minds have been shut off, and we're like robots. We react to things, if that makes any sense to you. When you hear the word ascending, enlightenment, you've been programmed to have a certain response, like an animal. So if someone says you got to work for it, some people get mad. If somebody says one religion, you say the other religion. And honestly, you probably don't understand either one of them, because almost every religion, in a sense, at its heart, it's all come from the same source. Anyway, just the religions themselves only exist based on the people they were sent to. You know, in the Quran, when it says when Allah says warners are sent to every land, meaning every culture has their own prophets. That's what happens. Same universal system is going to get altered based on the culture that the person has to actually work with. So arguing about religion is not really, could get counterproductive very quickly, to be honest. But because we're taught to be animals, we can't see that. So, in a sense, imagination is powerful. Imagination is something where when you get a signal from the higher forces, when your imagination is clean, you can do your job in your unique way. Because everyone's imagination is unique in their own way, to be honest. Sometimes people don't really realize it because, like I said, we're sleeping. So when you're sleeping, we're kind of trained to all act the same. You want the same things, desire the same things, love the same celebrities, hate the same celebrities. There's nothing unique about what we do. And part of that is because we need reason, mathematics, logic, science to help our imagination. The greatest science are actually artists as well. You know, they'll play music, they'll be fans of sci-fi. Why? Because the geniuses truly understand you need both. And imagination is powerful because it's a way of your subconscious mind and conscious mind kind of working together. You know, your subconscious mind thinks in pictures. Imagination, you could think any picture you think about comes true, but your logical mind is the one actually giving the response. So it's actually a combination of both. That's the why it's a weapon. Because in the end, your goal is to tie both hemispheres of your brain together, conscious, subconscious together, merge your superconscious, which is your inner genius. The imagination is an early way of being able to do that. With your imagination, you can do it even when both hemispheres are not tied in together yet. But it's a way to show you how to do it, and at the same time, like I said, it's a weapon. When you really get into real spirituality, realistically, any ritual that the person gives you, any prayer that the person gives you, it's just you really accessing your imagination. And depending if you have enough stored energy and you have understanding of what you're actually trying to do, then it comes true. And it comes true in your own unique way. So, in a sense, yes, imagination, very powerful. The Empress of the Tarot, you could identify her with Shakti or Kali in the Eastern systems, if you want to. Very powerful. Every god in Hinduism, for the most part, dealt with that Shakti energy. Right? For sure. But, imagination by itself needs assistance. It needs the person to be able to filter out what's coming into their minds. And that's where most people have the problem. Because if your logical mind is shut down, you can't filter out what's coming in your mind. So, science and mathematics, you know, even studying philosophy, debates, economics, politics may seem boring. But if you get an F in them, you're probably going to get an F spiritually too. The only difference is when your imagination is active and is into fantasy and daydreaming, which, by the way, fantasy and daydreaming is the worst possible thing you can do when you're trying to do spiritual work. Trust me. The world behind the mirrors is so massive. There's so many realms and universes. There's no need to create fantasy about what you want or whatever, because in a sense, your imagination can access those realms. And yeah, you know, you get the people who say anything your mind thinks comes true or exists. Yeah, that's true. But look at the tree of life a little harder, though. You have something called the tree of death. You got something in between it. You call it the abyss if you want. That's kind of like in between the tree of life, tree of death. The abyss is where discarded material goes through. So if I want to make toast, I think about toast, but then I say, you know what? Let me get an apple. The toast, the thought, goes into the abyss. Yeah, Joe down the street could think about the toast. He'd be like, damn, man, that toast look good, but that toast is in the garbage. If I'm thinking about the apple probably better for you, better for me. Eat the apple, get some nutrients. I go up. I think about realms that is evolving, that's expanding, that's more relevant to what I'm trying to do. Abyss, fantasy, that's cool, but that has nothing to do with your spiritual work. If I want to go to a movie, I see Thor, Spider-Man, Batman, it's cool. Yeah, they could kind of exist, maybe in some phantom realm, some realm of the abyss. They could kind of exist, but they don't really have as much relevance to my everyday life after that 2.5 hours is done. So when you're dealing with spirituality, you want to be able to know what the higher force is directing you to. That's not fantasy. Fantasy is discarded material from you or from someone else that you tap into. That could be fun, but too much focus on that, you lose energy. See, the real trick is, I go to realms that matter mentally. I bring them down here, because that's what all geniuses do. What you call ingenious, all they do is go to the mental realm, bring it back down here, they create an invention. Go to the mental realm, bring it back down, I do it once, twice, my energy starts to expand because I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So then it goes from 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 inventions. That's the difference. Nature herself responds to you and says, wow, let me give you more responsibility. When I go to the abyss, discarded material, you don't get energy. You don't get a burst of energy doing that. You actually lose energy. So imagination is important. Use it wisely. Till next time. Peace.